Tycoon returns to find his ex-wife living lavishly with twins, who look just like him. The private jet cut through the clouds like a ghost returning from exile. Rain slid down the windows like memories refusing to be forgotten. Inside, Daniel Lee sat alone, his fingers tense around a glass of untouched whiskey, eyes locked on the dark skyline of Seoul drawing nearer through the mist. It had been 7 years. 7 long, silent, brutal years. The seat across from him was empty, symbolic of so many things. Once it had been her favorite spot. Soojin. Her name still burned in his chest like an ember buried beneath layers of ash. He tried to sip the whiskey, but the taste revolted him. Tasted like guilt. The voice of the pilot came over the speaker. "Mr. Lee, we'll be landing in 10 minutes. Daniel didn't answer. He closed his eyes, and like a switch being pulled in his mind, he was back to that night. The night he left. It wasn't storming then. The sky had been clear. Her face had been soaked, not by rain, but tears. He could still hear her voice, broken but proud. "If you walk out that door, don't ever come back." And he had walked, because he thought love was a distraction. He thought building his empire was more important than holding her hand through the unknown. She had begged him, not to stay, not to love her, but to listen. "I'm pregnant, Daniel." He hadn't even blinked. "That's your problem." Now, the weight of those words suffocated him. When the plane landed, Daniel stepped onto the tarmac with the cautious steps of a man returning not just to a city, but to the ruins of everything he had destroyed. Seoul hadn't changed much, but he had. His reflection in the window of the black SUV that picked him up startled him. The silver at his temples, the tightness around his mouth, the eyes that seemed permanently bruised from regret. The car wove through familiar streets. Neon lights blinked, advertisements towered over him. People passed by in a blur of umbrellas and rushing steps. It was still the city that never paused, but he felt like a ghost walking through it. He told the driver to stop near an old art gallery. It was closed now, abandoned and faded. But it had been hers. Soojin's first dream made real. He stepped out, letting the rain hit him, soaking his coat. He stared at the locked doors as if hoping they would open with a whisper. He crouched, running his hand along the stone by the steps. His fingers found a faint carving, D+S. A laugh escaped him, bitter and sharp. "You stupid bastard," he whispered to himself. He had everything. Money, power, global recognition. But none of it mattered now. He stood up and walked, not knowing where his feet would take him. But the city did. It led him, strangely, to the Han River. The same bench where they used to sit, where Soojin would rest her head on his shoulder and dream aloud about the future. "Do you think we'll still be in love when we're old?" she had once asked. "Love is for people with time, Soojin. I want legacy." She had turned away from him that night, but stayed. And now he was the one sitting alone. The wind was colder here, and it cut through his expensive coat like it knew he deserved the chill. The next day, he tried to go back to routine. He visited his company's Seoul headquarters. People bowed. Assistants trailed behind him, reporting numbers and acquisitions, but he barely heard them. Every face was the wrong one. Every voice, not hers. Later, at night, in a penthouse hotel suite with a view that stretched endlessly over the city, Daniel stood by the window, sipping tea this time, trying to cleanse himself of the bitterness he carried inside. He looked out, feeling the distance between him and the world. Then the world shifted. He had stepped out of the hotel the following afternoon, walking with no destination, letting the city carry him when he saw her. It wasn't in some dramatic setting. It was on a regular street, near a boutique. She stood there, radiant in a beige coat, her long black hair falling softly down her shoulders. Her eyes scanned her phone as she laughed at something. A quiet, peaceful laugh he had once loved more than the sound of applause. And then, 2 little boys ran up to her, identical in every way. Same dark hair, same almond-shaped eyes, same slight dimple on the left cheek. She bent down, hugging them tightly as they handed her flowers they had picked from somewhere. Daniel stopped breathing. It was like looking into a mirror of the past, himself twice over. The boys were maybe 6, no older. And suddenly, time slowed. The noise of the street faded. The cars, the chatter, the horns gone. All he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. She turned, sensing something, and their eyes met. Hers widened, just for a second. Then the wall came up. Her smile vanished. She stood upright, protective, her arm instinctively moving in front of the boys. They didn't notice him, but she did. And in her eyes he saw it. Shock, pain, anger, disgust, and worst of all, fear. She turned without a word, guiding the children into a parked car. It drove away. Daniel stood frozen on the sidewalk, his hands trembling. He didn't know how long he stayed there. All he knew was that everything he thought he'd buried had just come back to life. And this time it had a face. 2 faces. His son's. His world tilted on its axis. Suddenly, the empire he had built felt like a house of cards. What good was legacy if he had no one to leave it to? He had returned to Seoul to fix his reputation. But now he would stay to reclaim something far more fragile. A chance to be a father. A chance to face the woman whose heart he had shattered. And maybe, just maybe, a chance to forgive himself. The story hadn't ended 7 years ago. The city that once felt like a symbol of ambition now felt like a maze of memories. Each corner echoing with her voice. Each street haunted by the sound of children laughing who might have called him Dad. He sat alone on the balcony, the lights of Seoul glittering below, but the world felt distant, hollow. He pulled out his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen as he searched her name. Sujin Park. Hundreds of results appeared. Not the fragile girl he once left behind, but a successful designer, founder of her own interior design firm. Pictures flooded in, awards, exhibitions, elegant red carpet appearances. In every photo she stood tall, poised, distant. In some, the twins were with her, always dressed impeccably, smiling brightly, but never with a man beside them. There was no mention of a husband, no indication of a father. He zoomed into a photo, one of the boys holding a drawing. The other had his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, his dimple barely visible in the corner of the shot. Daniel leaned forward, breath caught in his throat. That dimple was his, a deep ache pressed against his chest. He had lost 6 years, 6 birthdays, 6 winters without them, 6 summers never spent chasing them through sprinklers or holding them after a nightmare. And Sujin, she had done it all alone. His hand shook as he whispered to himself, "What have I done?" The next morning, he stood outside the glass windows of her boutique design studio. From the outside, it looked perfect, minimalist elegance, clean lines, plants carefully arranged by the entrance. Her world, completely untouched by him. He didn't go in. He watched instead, until the moment she stepped out. She didn't see him. She was laughing again. A soft, true laugh, talking with her assistant as she carried a clipboard. She was radiant. He couldn't breathe. And before he could stop himself, he stepped forward. "Sujin," he called, voice uncertain. She froze mid-step. The assistant looked up, confused. But Sujin, her body went still, then slowly turned. Their eyes locked. For a second, the world narrowed down to the space between them. The wind picked up her hair, brushing it across her cheek, just like it had years ago on that night in the rain. Her expression didn't change. It was composed. But her eyes, he saw it. The flicker of emotion, the sting of memory, the sharp inhale she tried to hide. "I didn't think you'd show up here," she said quietly. "I didn't plan to. I saw you yesterday. With the boys," he said, voice hoarse. "I had to know if they're yours," she cut in sharply. He flinched but nodded. She glanced at her assistant and gave her a soft command. "Go ahead without me." When the woman walked off, Sujin turned back to him. "You don't get to show up now and ask questions, Daniel," she said. "You made your decision a long time ago." He stepped closer, hands open in surrender. "I was wrong. I know that. I was a coward. I thought I was protecting my future, but I was destroying it." "You didn't destroy your future," she replied, her voice calm but sharp as glass. You destroyed ours. Her words sliced through him. I had nothing, she continued. No family, no money. I wrote to you. I begged you to listen. But you were too busy chasing shareholders and headlines. I raised them alone. I watched them take their first steps, speak their first words, cry through fevers, alone. You weren't just absent, you were gone. I didn't know, he whispered. No, she said, voice rising now. You didn't want to know. You didn't ask. He felt his knees weaken, but he didn't back away. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me be part of their lives. I can't undo the past, Sujin, but I can show them who I am now. Please. Her eyes filled, but she blinked quickly, swallowing the emotion. They're happy, Daniel, she said, her voice trembling slightly. They don't know you. They don't miss you. Why would I let you disturb that? He felt the sting, and yet he understood. Because they deserve to know the truth, he said gently. They deserve to know their father didn't stop loving them before he even met them. She took a step back. No, you don't get to rewrite the story just because you're ready now. I don't know what brought you back, but if you're here to play savior or reclaim something, you're too late. With that, she turned and walked away, and he let her go, for now. But her words replayed in his head like a vow. You're too late. Not if he had anything to do with it. He spent the next few days in silence, watching from afar. He never approached the boys, but he learned their names. Miho and Jisoo. He saw them go to school. He watched Sujin wait at the gates every afternoon, hugging them when they ran out laughing. It felt like watching his heart play on a screen he couldn't touch. One evening, he stood in the shadows across from the playground, just as the sun was dipping below the buildings. The twins were racing each other, barefoot on the grass. Miho fell, and Daniel instinctively took a step forward. But Sujin was already there, kneeling, wiping the boy's tears, whispering something that made him laugh again. Daniel smiled through the tears burning in his eyes. That was the mother of his children. That was the woman he'd left behind, stronger than ever, fiercer than he remembered. He turned to leave, heart aching, but then he heard a voice behind him. Why are you following my family? Daniel turned. A man stood there, tall, confident, polished. He was holding a bouquet of flowers and had a key to Sujin's car in hand. Who are you? Daniel asked. I'm the man helping her forget you ever existed. The man replied, calm and cold. Stay away from her, and stay away from our sons. Daniel's breath caught. Our sons, he repeated. But the man just smiled and walked away. And in that moment, Daniel realized he wasn't just fighting against the past. Our sons. His fists clenched at his sides. Not because of the arrogance in the man's voice, but because of the terrifying possibility that someone else had been raising his children, tucking them in at night, hearing them say, I love you, seeing them become who they were. The storm of jealousy and guilt hit him all at once. He didn't even know the man's name, but his mind was a cyclone of questions. Was Sujin in love with him? Was he the reason she smiled now? Was he the one who picked up the pieces Daniel had shattered and built a safer life around her? Daniel hated him, but what he hated more, what twisted deeper than rage, was himself. For giving someone else the opportunity to be there, to become dad in his absence. That night, sleep was impossible. He sat on the couch, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the hotel suite crushing. Images of Miho and Jisoo filled his mind, running across grass, climbing into that man's car, holding his hand. And then, one image stood out. The look in Sujin's eyes when she told him, You destroyed ours. His throat tightened. He had to know the truth. All of it. The next morning, he went to find someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Mrs. Lee, his mother. They hadn't parted well. When he left Sujin, he had done it under his family's pressure, and she had led the charge. He arrived at the estate, greeted coldly by the staff. Nothing had changed, the marble floors, the silence, the smell of tradition and expectations. She was in the sunroom, sipping tea, elegant as always. Daniel, she said, setting her cup down, her voice neutral. I heard you were back. He sat across from her, not bothering with pleasantries. His eyes locked onto hers. You knew she was pregnant. Her expression didn't shift. I suspected, she answered. She sent letters. Of course I read them. And you never told me? Her sigh was light, as if the conversation were tedious. Daniel, you were preparing to take over the company. A scandal like that, unmarried, a child with a girl like her, would have destroyed everything you'd built. A girl like her? He repeated, his voice breaking at the edges. His mother sipped her tea. She was emotional, dramatic, from a poor family. You were thinking with your heart, not your head. We did what was best. He stood up abruptly, chair scraping across the floor. No, you did what was best for you, for your image. I was a coward, but you were cruel. You had a choice, she said coldly. You always did. He left without another word. Outside, in the bitter morning air, he felt the wind slice through his coat like judgment. His legs carried him forward without direction, and he realized he was walking back to the old apartment, the place he and Sujin once lived when they were young and in love and stupid with dreams. It was run down now, a different name on the mailbox, but memories lived there, vivid and raw. One in particular, the night she told him she was pregnant. She had been standing by the window, holding her stomach, her eyes wide, afraid, hopeful. I want to keep it, she had whispered, and he had laughed. Do you think I'm ready to be a father? He had said. Do you think this is part of the plan? She had looked at him like he was a stranger. Daniel, it's our child. And he had turned away. He leaned now against that same building wall, his head tipped back, eyes closed. And he wept. He wept for who he used to be, for who she had to become without him, for two boys who never knew they had another name. Later that evening, he found himself parked outside Sujin's new home. It was modestly luxurious, gated, quiet, warm light spilling from the windows. He sat in the car, engine off, in the dark, watching shadows move behind the curtains. Then the front door opened. Sujin stepped out in a sweater and jeans, carrying trash bags toward the curb. She hadn't seen him. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun. Her steps hurried. He got out. She paused halfway, her breath visible in the cold air. I just wanted to talk, he said softly. I told you not to come here. I needed to know if it's true, he said, that he raised them, that they call him... No, she cut in, her voice trembling. They don't call him anything. He's just a friend, a protector. He's been here helping. Are you in love with him? He asked before he could stop himself. Her eyes welled up, but she looked away. I don't owe you that answer. I'm sorry, he whispered. I don't have the right to ask, but I need you to know I didn't come back to make things harder. I came back because the moment I saw them, I realized I never stopped loving you. She shook her head, eyes filled with too much pain. Love isn't what you say when it's convenient, Daniel. It's what you show when it costs you everything. And before he could respond, a voice echoed from inside. Mom, we're thirsty. She turned, her voice breaking slightly. Coming. Then she looked back at him, something in her face softening for the briefest moment. They don't know who you are, she whispered. They think you're just a stranger. He stepped forward, voice low. Then let me be a stranger who earns their trust. One day at a time. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, without a word, she walked back into the house, closing the door quietly behind her. He stood there, heart pounding, as lights flickered behind the curtains, the soft murmur of their laughter carrying through the air like distant music. He was no longer shut out, but he wasn't welcomed in either. Then he saw them. The boys came running out of a silver sedan, backpacks bouncing, their coats slightly unzipped, hair tousled in that way that only young boys had. Sujin stepped out after them, kneeling quickly to zip one of their coats, fixing the other's collar. She kissed their foreheads, and the twins ran toward the gates, laughing. Daniel couldn't hear it from where he sat, but he could see the joy in their faces. It was effortless, pure. His chest ached as he whispered to himself, They don't even know what they're missing. Sujin stood at the gate for a moment longer, her arms crossed against the cold. Then she turned and locked eyes with him through the cafe window. Her expression didn't change, but she didn't look away either. Instead, she walked toward the door. He stood as she entered, her coat still unbuttoned, her cheeks flushed from the morning chill. "This isn't your life anymore, Daniel," she said quietly, sitting down without being invited. "You can't just watch from the shadows and hope something changes." "I'm not hoping," he said, his voice steady. "I'm staying, whether you want me here or not." "You say that like it's noble," she replied, folding her hands. "But you're years too late. I raised them without you. I held them when they cried. I cheered when they took their first steps. You don't get to claim them now just because you showed up." He leaned in, his voice low and trembling. "I'm not trying to claim them, Sujin. I just want the chance to know them. Even if it takes years. Even if it hurts." She stared at him for a long moment, the weight of her silence pressing heavy between them. Then she sighed, something softer flickering in her eyes. "They think their father is dead." Daniel froze. "What?" "I told them you died before they were born," she said, looking down at her hands. "I was alone, scared. I didn't want them growing up wondering why you didn't want them. I couldn't—" Her voice cracked. "I couldn't bear to see that confusion in their eyes." His mouth opened, but no words came. She wiped her eyes quickly and continued. "And now? What do I tell them? That their father isn't dead, he just abandoned them? That he left me when I needed him most and now wants a second chance? I don't deserve forgiveness," he said, "but I'll earn their trust. Slowly, gently, just let me try." Sujin looked away toward the window, where children ran across the schoolyard. "You'll break them if you leave again." "I won't. You already did once." She stood up, placing a hand on the back of the chair as if grounding herself. "Miho's the quiet one. He has trouble sleeping sometimes. Nightmares. He's stubborn like you. They don't know you, Daniel. They don't miss you. But if you want to be part of their lives—" She hesitated, then said with a heavy breath, "Start from the outside. No introductions. Just observe. Be kind. Be present. And maybe, just maybe, one day, they'll come to you." He nodded, every part of him aching with gratitude and guilt. "Thank you," he whispered. Sujin didn't smile. She simply turned and walked away again, disappearing into the crowd. The following week, Daniel returned to the same cafe every morning. He watched them come and go. He noticed little things. Miho liked to hum to himself when he walked. Jisoo always held the left strap of his backpack with both hands. When they passed a puppy on the street, they both knelt at the same time and giggled in sync. Every little detail burned itself into Daniel's memory like it had been missing from him his entire life. And then, one afternoon, he saw them again, this time at the park. It wasn't coincidence. He had followed from a respectful distance, watching as Sujin spread out a blanket on the grass. The boys were running ahead, throwing a ball, shouting at each other in childish glee. The sunlight hit them just right. It made them glow. Daniel sat on a bench far away, watching, and suddenly the ball rolled toward him. Jisoo ran after it and stopped when he saw the man sitting there. His eyes narrowed curiously. "You again," he said. Daniel blinked. "You've seen me before? You're always at the cafe near school," the boy said. "And once you were at the playground." Daniel swallowed hard. "That's true. Are you a spy?" The question made him laugh soft, surprised. "Something like that." "You're not very good at it," Jisoo added, crossing his arms. "I'll try harder," Daniel replied, his voice thick with emotion. Jisoo picked up the ball and looked at him again, his eyes sharp and assessing. "You look like me," he said. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. Jisoo tilted his head. "Or I look like you." "I guess we just have the same face," Daniel said gently. The boy looked him over, then turned back toward his brother. But just before he ran, he said, "Miho has nightmares sometimes. He talks to someone in his sleep. Maybe it's you." Daniel sat in silence long after the boy had gone. the sound of their laughter still ringing in his ears. And that night, for the first time in years, he dreamed. He dreamed of two boys running into his arms, of Sujin smiling, not with pain, but with peace. He whispered under his breath, "You look like me." Jisu's voice played again in his mind. The innocence, the strange certainty. Miho has nightmares. He talks to someone in his sleep. Maybe it's you. He pressed his palms against the counter. The idea that his child might already feel some part of him, even without knowing who he was, it overwhelmed him. He'd missed everything, but some connection had still formed, buried in the silence. That thought carried him through the day like a fragile thread of hope. In the late afternoon, he returned to the park. Not to watch from the distance this time. He brought something. A kite. The breeze was perfect. Steady, playful, promising. He stood near the field, struggling with the tangled strings, when a familiar voice called out from behind him. "Still not very good at hiding, Mr. Spy." He turned to find Jisu staring at him, hands in the pockets of his coat. Miho stood a few steps behind, more reserved, his eyes uncertain. Daniel smiled. "I never said I was a professional." Jisu stepped closer, looking at the kite in his hands. "You gonna fly that thing or tangle it in a tree?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "That depends. You want to help me or just stand there making fun of me?" The boy's mouth curled into a smirk. "I guess I can show you how it's done." Miho still didn't speak, but slowly moved closer, his small hands tucked into his sleeves. Daniel kneeled on the grass, spreading out the kite. "Here," he said, offering the spool. "Hold this tight, and when I say go, run." Jisu took it without hesitation. "Miho, come on." The quieter twin hesitated, then knelt beside his brother. Daniel stepped back, heart pounding. He hadn't said anything, hadn't asked Sujin's permission, but something in the moment felt untouched, honest. He needed this memory, even if they didn't know the truth. "Ready?" he called. "Go!" Jisu yelled instead, bolting across the grass with Miho close behind. The kite lifted, sputtered, and then rose. It danced against the pale sky, the tail fluttering in the wind. Laughter erupted. Jisu cheered, spinning with the spool in hand, and Miho looked back. His face finally lit up with a shy, uncertain smile. Daniel felt it like a blade through his ribs. He wanted to run to them, scoop them into his arms, tell them everything. But he stayed where he was, hands in his pockets, letting the wind carry the moment instead of words. Then he heard a voice, one that froze his blood. "What do you think you're doing, Sujin?" She stood at the edge of the park, her face pale, her voice sharp like shattered glass. Jisu stopped running. Miho's smile disappeared instantly. Daniel turned slowly, already knowing what he'd see. Her eyes wide with fury, her body trembling as she walked toward them. "I told you to stay away," she hissed through clenched teeth as she approached. "They came to me," Daniel said softly. "I was just here. I didn't call them." "I don't care," she snapped. "You don't get to be a part of their joy when you weren't there for their pain." "Sujin," he pleaded. "Please, just look at them. They're laughing. They're confused," she cried, her voice breaking. "You're a stranger playing father in a park, and they don't understand why it feels right." The boys stood frozen, watching. Jisu looked angry, his jaw clenched. Miho looked like he wanted to disappear. "I didn't mean to hurt them," Daniel said, stepping closer to her. "I swear I didn't." "You keep saying that, but you don't understand," she said, tears filling her eyes now. "You're opening doors I spent years trying to close. You think you're healing them, but what if you're just reopening every wound?" There was a silence, deep and cold. Then, Miho spoke for the first time. "Mom!" They both turned to him. Miho's voice trembled. Is he our dad?" The words dropped like thunder in the stillness. Sujin's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled instantly, her whole body trembling. Jisu turned to his brother, stunned, and then slowly looked at Daniel. Daniel didn't breathe. "Yes," Sujin whispered at last, her voice barely audible. He is. Miho blinked. Why did you say he was dead? She broke, tears spilling over. Because I didn't know how to explain the truth. I was scared you'd hate him. I was scared you'd hate me. The boys looked at each other. Then, without a word, Jisoo walked away. Miho followed. Daniel moved as if to stop them, but Sujin grabbed his arm. Her grip was firm, desperate. Don't, she said. Please, just don't. He looked at her, and for the first time saw the full weight of her fear. It wasn't about control. It wasn't revenge. She was protecting them. From the confusion, the betrayal, the storm she knew was coming. I didn't want them to cry again, she said, her voice breaking. They cried enough without knowing why. Daniel nodded slowly, his throat tight. I understand. They're not ready, she whispered. And maybe, neither are you. He turned to where the boys had disappeared into the trees. A part of him wanted to chase them, but a stronger part knew he couldn't. Not yet. He had waited 6 years. The moment the truth surfaced, it stopped being about hope and became something raw, messy, real. No longer a secret he carried alone. No longer a quiet ache. It was out in the open now, and the boys, his boys, were processing what that meant in their own small, fragile ways. But silence wasn't stillness. It was movement underground. On the 4th day, Daniel sat alone at a bookstore cafe in Samcheong-dong, flipping through pages of a book he hadn't read a word of, when he heard a soft voice behind him. Why did you leave? His body stilled. He turned slowly. Miho stood at the entrance, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes wide with something deeper than curiosity. The boy's voice was steady, but his bottom lip quivered just enough to break something inside Daniel's chest. Where's your mom? Daniel asked gently. She doesn't know I'm here, Miho said. I told Jisoo I was going to the comic shop. Daniel stood, uncertain, but cautious. Miho, I don't think this is a good idea. I just want to know, the boy said, cutting him off. Why did you leave my mom? Why didn't you want us? The cafe around them blurred. Conversations, footsteps, the distant clatter of cups. It all faded. All Daniel could see was that small, trembling boy looking up at him like he held the answer to a question that had been growing in silence for 6 years. I didn't know how to be a father, Daniel said quietly. I was afraid. I thought love would get in the way of the life I wanted. Miho didn't blink. And now I know I gave up the only thing that ever really mattered. The boy looked down at the floor. Daniel knelt beside him, careful not to move too fast. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. And I'm not asking for you to suddenly call me Dad. I'm so sorry. I made the worst mistake of my life. And if you ever give me the chance, I want to earn your trust. One day at a time. Miho's voice was barely a whisper. Do you love my mom? The question hit harder than Daniel expected. I never stopped, he answered. Miho looked up then, his eyes shimmering. She cried a lot. I heard her sometimes. At night. Daniel's throat tightened, his hands shaking as he reached out. Slowly, resting them on the boy's shoulders. I would give anything to take that pain away. Miho didn't say anything. He just nodded. I have to go, he murmured, pulling back. Before she notices I'm gone. Daniel stood and walked him to the door. Before Miho slipped out, he turned back. Can I come again? He asked. Daniel blinked through the burn in his eyes. Anytime. The door closed behind the boy, and Daniel leaned against the glass, breathing slowly, holding on to the tiny sliver of light that moment had given him. Later that night, he sat in the hotel, staring out at the city. He hadn't touched his dinner. His phone buzzed once. An unknown number. A text. Tomorrow. 4 p.m. Park bench near the fountain. Come alone. His heart skipped. He arrived 10 minutes early. The sky a soft violet. Birds flickering through the trees. The wind carried the scent of wet earth and cherry blossoms just starting to bud. And then she appeared. Sujin walked slowly, wrapped in a cream coat, her hair tucked beneath a scarf. She sat beside him on the bench, not looking at him. Miho told me, she said, everything. Daniel nodded, waiting. He's not the type to open up, she added. Not even to me. But he said you didn't lie. That your eyes were shaking. Daniel exhaled. They always are now. A long pause stretched between them. I told myself for years that if you ever came back, I wouldn't let you close, she whispered. That I'd protect the boys from you, from the past, from the version of you I remembered. I don't blame you. I still don't know if I can trust you, she admitted. I'm not asking for your trust. Not yet. Just let me be near. Let me prove I'm not that man anymore. She looked at him then, and in her eyes, he saw the battle, love still buried under layers of hurt. I saw you watching us that day at the park, she said. Before the kite. You looked like a man watching his own life through a glass wall. That's exactly how it feels. Another silence. Then softly, she asked, Do you know how old they were when they first asked about their father? Daniel shook his head. 3. Jisoo saw another boy with his dad at a festival. He asked me where his was. I told him some people don't get to meet their fathers. Her voice cracked. He cried all night. Miho didn't say anything. But the next morning, I found him holding Jisoo while he slept. Daniel looked away, unable to speak. I've hated you, she confessed. I've loved you. I've wished you'd come back. And I've prayed you never would. He turned to her. And now, she hesitated. I don't know, she whispered. But I'm tired, Daniel. I've been tired for so long. Maybe it's time to stop running. The wind stirred the branches above them. Will you let me be part of their world? He asked gently. I'll talk to Jisoo, she said. But it has to be on their terms. And mine. He nodded. Thank you, he said softly. She stood. As she walked away, she turned once more. You were always better at running away, she said. Let's see if you're any good at staying. And then she was gone again. But this time it wasn't goodbye. Then there they were. Jisoo walked beside Sujin, a cautious distance between them. He wasn't holding her hand. His eyes flicked everywhere except toward the bench. Sujin gave Daniel a small nod from afar, her expression unreadable. She gently nudged Jisoo forward, whispering something that made him frown. But he started walking anyway, dragging his feet through the fallen cherry blossoms that dusted the path. When he stopped in front of Daniel, the silence was thick and uncomfortable. Daniel stood slowly, unsure. I didn't know if you'd come, he said. I didn't come for you, Jisoo replied, arms crossed, chin lifted with quiet defiance. I came because Mom asked me to. Daniel smiled faintly. Fair enough. The boy's eyes narrowed. Why did you lie? I didn't lie. You let her say you were dead. Daniel's voice cracked as he answered. I didn't know she'd told you that. Still, Jisoo muttered. You left anyway. Daniel knelt to be at eye level. Yes, and I regret it every day. Jisoo's gaze didn't soften. Do you want to replace Youngwoo? Daniel blinked. Is that what this is about? Jisoo looked down. He's been there for us. Since I was 2. He never left. He's not perfect. But he's there. Daniel took a slow breath, nodding. I'm not here to take anyone's place, he said. I don't want to erase what Youngwoo gave you. I just want to be allowed to exist in your life. That's all. Jisoo stared at him for a long time, his young face a mixture of confusion, pride, and something far too heavy for a child to carry. Do you even know what my favorite color is? He asked suddenly. Daniel's heart stuttered. No, I don't. What's my favorite food? I don't know that either, he admitted, his voice gentle. But I'd like to learn. Jisoo shifted uncomfortably, then sat down hard on the bench. Daniel remained kneeling, unsure what to do with the sudden shift. I don't like liars, the boy said. And I don't like people who leave. Neither do I, Daniel whispered. I used to be both, but I'm not anymore. Silence stretched again. Then Jisoo spoke, eyes on the ground. I used to dream about my dad. I didn't know his face, but in my dream he always carried me when I was scared. He had strong arms, but his voice was soft. One time, I told Miho I thought maybe that was real. He didn't believe me. Daniel swallowed against the lump in his throat. It was real, he said softly. Maybe not then, but it can be now. Jisoo finally looked at him again, something raw in his eyes. Are you gonna leave again? No, Daniel said. Even if you hate me, I'll stay. Jisoo didn't answer. He stood up, brushing off his pants, and glanced back toward where Soojin stood beneath the trees, watching them from afar. Then he looked at Daniel once more. I like blue, he said. Not light blue, navy. And I hate kimchi, even though Mom keeps trying to make me like it. Daniel let out a quiet, broken laugh. Got it. Navy blue, and no kimchi. Jisoo turned and walked away without saying goodbye. Daniel watched him go, stunned by how such a small exchange had cracked something wide open inside him. Soojin approached slowly. Well? She asked quietly. I think, Daniel said, still kneeling on the path. I just met my son for the first time. Soojin's lips curved into the faintest smile, her eyes glassy. He's always been stubborn, she said. But he doesn't waste his words. If he spoke to you, it means something. Daniel looked up at her, searching for the past in her face, the pain he'd caused and the strength she'd built around it. What about you? He asked. She looked away. This isn't about me. Yes, it is. Soojin was silent for a long time. Then she sighed. I don't know how to forgive you, Daniel, she admitted. Every part of my life was changed because of you. I cried so hard once, I thought I'd stop breathing. And still, I raised them. I taught them how to be kind. I stood in the dark alone while they slept and told myself we'd be okay. Even when I didn't believe it. Daniel's eyes stung. You were, he whispered. You made them okay. She met his gaze then, something deep and old passing between them. You don't get to love us with your whole heart now, she said, because that's not what we need. We need patience, consistency, and truth. I'll give you all three, he promised. I know you want a second chance, she said, voice soft. But this time you're going to earn it on our terms. Not yours. I will. She stepped back, looking down the path where Jisoo had vanished. Miho still hasn't talked about you, she added. He holds everything inside. But if he comes to you, don't rush him. He carries more weight than he shows. Daniel nodded, overwhelmed. I won't push him. I'll wait. Soojin looked at him once more, and for the first time in years, there was no anger in her eyes, just fear and hope. She turned and walked away slowly, letting the wind take her scarf, letting the space between them grow. Daniel stood alone, the last light of the day touching the back of his hands. He had broken a family once. He was their father, and Miho didn't know how to feel. He hadn't asked questions like Jisoo. He hadn't stormed off or argued. Instead, he had simply nodded, crawled into bed early that night, and stared at the ceiling, trying to understand why his chest felt tight even though no one had yelled or scolded or left. From the hallway, Soojin watched him quietly, her heart in pieces. The last few days had cracked open wounds she thought were long healed. She knew her son. His silence wasn't peace. It was fear. She stepped into the room and sat beside him. You've been very quiet, she said softly. Miho didn't look up. I'm just tired. She brushed his hair gently. Do you want to talk about it? He shook his head. But after a moment, his small voice broke the stillness. He was crying. Soojin stilled. Who? That man, Daniel. When he watched us fly the kite. I saw him wiping his eyes. She swallowed hard. Yes, I saw that too. Why would he cry? Miho asked. If he left us? She thought for a moment. Because sometimes, people don't realize what they've lost until it's too late. He looked up at her, eyes wide and uncertain. Is he going to take us away? No, she said firmly. No one is taking you anywhere. He just wants to know you. But only if you want to know him too. Miho nodded again, this time slower. I had dreams about him, he whispered, before I even knew who he was. Soojin blinked. What kind of dreams? Miho looked down at his rabbit. stroking its ear with his thumb. He carried me when I was scared, and he had a soft voice. I always thought it was made up, but when I heard him speak at the park, it felt like I'd already heard him before. Sujin's breath caught. "Do you want to see him?" she asked. Miho didn't answer right away, but then he whispered, "Maybe, but only if you come with me." She smiled, tears rising. "Of course, I'll always be with you." The next day, Daniel stood in the same spot he had the first time he saw them, outside the cafe watching the school gates. But this time he wasn't hiding. He didn't flinch when Sujin approached, Miho walking slowly beside her. The boy held her hand tightly, his expression guarded. Daniel stood up, heart thudding in his chest. "Hi," he said gently. Miho nodded, eyes fixed on the ground. Sujin looked down at her son. "Remember what we talked about?" Miho nodded again. "Do you want to sit with him for a bit?" "I'll be right here." Miho hesitated, then took a small step forward. Daniel knelt so they were eye level. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to," he said. "We can just sit." Miho slowly sat down on the edge of the bench, feet barely touching the ground. Daniel sat beside him, leaving a small space in between. After a minute, Miho spoke. "I like rabbits." Daniel smiled. "Me too. I had one when I was a kid. His name was Dodo." "Mine's named Moon-chi," Miho said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's a great name." Miho looked at him then, eyes searching. "Were you scared?" Daniel tilted his head. When you left?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Yes, very. But I didn't know I was scared. I told myself I was too busy, too important. But really, I was just afraid I'd mess everything up." "You did mess it up," Miho said, quiet but certain. Daniel smiled sadly. "I did." Miho looked away again. "You look like me." "I think I got lucky," Daniel said softly. "Because you're really handsome." A ghost of a smile tugged at Miho's lips. They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of children playing filling the air around them. Then Miho said, "Sometimes, I cry and I don't know why." Daniel nodded slowly. "Me too. I used to pretend I had a dad," Miho continued. "He lived on the moon. That's why he couldn't come visit. But he watched me through the stars." Daniel's breath shook. "If I could go back and be there from the start, I would. I'd never let go of you." Miho looked at him again, long and hard. "Are you gonna go away again?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "I promise you, Miho. I'm staying." Miho hesitated. Then slowly, so slowly it almost hurt to watch, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. He handed it to Daniel without a word. Daniel unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing. A man standing under a starry sky. Two small boys beside him. One was holding a rabbit. The man's hand was resting on the boy's shoulders. Tears filled Daniel's eyes before he could stop them. "I made it a long time ago," Miho said quietly. "Before I knew you were real." Daniel pressed the drawing to his chest. "Thank you," he whispered. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever been given." From a few feet away, Sujin watched, her heart caught between ache and wonder. Miho leaned closer. "You don't have to be perfect," he said. "Just don't disappear again." "I won't," Daniel whispered. "Not ever." Miho nodded once, then stood. He walked back to his mother without looking back, slipping his hand into hers. But just before they turned the corner, he glanced over his shoulder. And for the first time, Sujin stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself as the city lights flickered beneath the droplets. The drawing Miho had given Daniel had been carefully folded and left on the kitchen counter when he came home. He hadn't said much, just that he'd spoken to him, just that it didn't feel as scary anymore. She hadn't asked questions. She was too afraid of the answers. Behind her, the hallway echoed with soft footsteps. Miho's door closed gently. Then silence. She remained there for a long time watching the rain, and then her knees gave in. She sat on the floor beneath the window, trembling, the storm outside suddenly inside her too. She pulled her knees to her chest and pressed her hand to her mouth to keep the sobs from waking the boys. She had wanted this moment, had imagined it so many times, but nothing in her heart had prepared her for what it would actually feel like. Letting go of the lie she'd clung to, watching her children step into a world where the truth could hurt them. She'd spent 6 years being strong, 6 years keeping everything together. But now she felt like glass. The knock came hours later, soft, hesitant, almost not there. She opened the door in silence, already knowing. Daniel stood in the hallway, his shoulders soaked from the rain. His hair dripped over his forehead. He wasn't smiling. "I saw the lights were still on," he said. She didn't move. He didn't ask to come in. So she stepped aside, wordless, letting him pass. He stood in the middle of the living room, taking in the space. The photos on the wall, the toys tucked into corners, the scent of warm vanilla that always clung to her home. Then he turned to her, and the silence stretched, thick and aching. "I wanted to tell you something," he said. She nodded, arms crossed tightly. "I visited your parents a few days ago." Sujin's eyes widened. "Why would you?" "Because I had to know," he said quietly. "I had to know what you went through after I left." Her breath caught. "You went to them?" Daniel nodded. "They slammed the door in my face at first, but I waited. Eventually, your mother came out. She didn't want to talk, but she told me enough." He stepped closer, eyes dark with pain. "They said you were sick, malnourished, that you nearly collapsed one night trying to work 2 jobs while pregnant." She looked away, her voice brittle. "That was a long time ago. You shouldn't have been alone," he said, voice shaking. "You should never have been alone. And yet I was." She snapped suddenly, her voice sharper than she meant. "You think visiting them makes any of it easier? Do you think showing up now erases what I had to endure?" "I don't want to erase it," Daniel said. "I want to understand it. I need to." "Why?" she whispered. "So you can sleep better at night?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "So I never forget it. So I never, ever let myself believe I didn't do damage. Because I did, Sujin. I broke everything. And I don't want to pretend I didn't." She pressed her hands to her face. "I begged you," she whispered. "I begged you not to go. Do you remember that?" "I do," he said softly. "I was shaking," she continued, her voice raw. "I had the ultrasound picture in my hand. I thought if I showed it to you, if I just made you see, you'd stay." "I remember," he whispered. "You were wearing the green sweater. You didn't even have shoes on. You ran out into the hallway after me." Her knees buckled slightly, and she grabbed the back of a chair. "I bled that night," she said, her voice hollow. "I thought I was going to lose them." Daniel moved forward instinctively, but she held up her hand. "I got to the hospital alone," she continued. "I sat there for 6 hours before anyone even checked me. They told me I needed rest. I had nowhere to go. I had no one." His eyes burned. "Why didn't you tell me later?" he asked. "Why not after they were born?" She looked at him, her voice suddenly full of quiet fire. "Because I knew you wouldn't come for me. I knew you'd come for them. And I wasn't ready to hand them over to a man who disappeared when I needed him most." Daniel looked away, his hands shaking. "I don't want to take them from you," he said. "I just want to be part of what's already there. I want to add, not take away." Her arms loosened around herself. "And what happens when it gets hard again?" she asked. "What if they get sick? What if one of them asks you something you don't know how to answer? Are you going to run again?" "No," he said simply. "I won't. I swear it." She stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she turned and walked to the cabinet. From it, she pulled a dusty photo album. She handed it to him. Daniel sat on the couch, opening it with trembling hands. And there they were. The first photo. Miho and Jisoo in matching beanies, eyes wide, cheeks chubby, asleep on Sujin's chest. He brought his hand to his mouth. Page after page. First birthdays, scraped knees, crooked smiles, finger paint, tiny footprints. A whole life. A life he'd missed. I kept everything, she said softly. Even when I told myself you didn't deserve it, I kept it. Daniel looked up at her, his eyes brimming. Can I keep a copy? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. He closed the album gently. Sujin sat beside him, and for a long time they didn't speak. They just sat there, shoulder to shoulder, letting the years unfold between them, not as wounds, but as something else. Quiet promise. His eyes were red, his chest heavy, but his hands had stopped trembling. Sujin leaned back on the couch, her arms folded across her stomach, her gaze distant as she stared at the wall across from them. The light from the hallway spilled gently into the living room, casting soft shadows along the floor like memories stretching out across time. You always looked strong in the pictures, he said finally, his voice fragile. I wasn't, she replied. I just didn't have another option. Daniel nodded. I can see that now. A silence followed, not heavy, but thoughtful. I used to wonder what it would have been like, she said, barely above a whisper. If you had stayed, if we had raised them together. He turned toward her, studying her profile. So calm, so tired. And? He asked gently. I don't know, she said. Maybe we would have ruined each other. Or maybe we would have survived. Maybe you would have learned how to love slower, and I would have learned how to speak louder. Daniel lowered his head. I didn't know how to choose you, he murmured. Back then, I thought success meant standing alone. You always hated being vulnerable, she said. Even with me. He met her eyes. Especially with you, he admitted. Because with you, I felt everything too much. Sujin let out a soft, bitter laugh. And I spent years wondering if I wasn't enough. If it was my fault. No, he said quickly, his voice sharp with remorse. Never. It was all me. I was a coward. I saw a future with you and got scared I wasn't good enough to live up to it. She looked away, blinking back tears. Then why now? Why come back when everything's finally stable? Because I saw your strength, he said. I saw the boys. I saw what you created without me. And I realized I don't want to miss another second of it. Sujin was silent for a long moment. Then she asked something unexpected. Do you still write music? Daniel blinked. No, not since I left. Why? He hesitated, then whispered. Because it reminded me of you. She nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. I still have the melody you wrote for me. I used to hum it when I was scared during the pregnancy. It calmed the boys. He closed his eyes for a beat, overwhelmed. I didn't deserve that, he said. Maybe not, she replied. But they did. Suddenly, a soft voice called from the hallway. Mom! Both turned toward the sound. Miho stood there, rubbing his eyes, holding Moonchi tight to his chest. Behind him, Jisoo appeared too, awake but wary, his arms crossed. Sujin rose instantly. Hey, sweethearts. Did we wake you? No, Miho said. I had a dream. Jisoo was quieter, but he looked directly at Daniel. We saw the light on, he said. Daniel stood slowly. He didn't know what to say, or if he even should. Miho walked toward him cautiously, stopping just in front of him. He looked up, his small face serious. Can we have pancakes tomorrow? He asked. Daniel blinked. Pancakes? Miho nodded. You said you'd try. If we gave you a chance. Daniel knelt, his throat tightening. I'd love to make pancakes. Miho gave a single nod, then turned to go back to bed. But Jisoo lingered, and then, in a quiet, unsure voice, he said, No bananas. Daniel looked at him, stunned for a moment, then smiled. No bananas. Got it. Jisoo nodded once, then walked away. When they were gone, Daniel turned to Sujin. Her lips trembled as she looked at the space where their sons had stood. They've already let you in more than I expected, she said. Daniel shook his head. They're letting me in because of you, because you raised them with so much love. There's still room in their hearts for a man like me. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Instead, She walked to the kitchen and took out a small piece of paper from a drawer. "I never sent this," she said, handing it to him. He unfolded it. It was a letter, scrawled in the familiar loops of her handwriting. It was dated 6 years ago. "Daniel, they're beautiful. You would have loved them. They have your eyes and your stubbornness. Some nights, I still wait for the sound of your key in the door. I don't know why, but I want you to know. If you ever come back, don't come for me. Come for them. They're worth everything you gave up. And more. Sujin." Daniel stared at the letter until the tears blurred every word. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "No," she said gently, "but they do." And in that quiet moment, with the rain still falling against the windows, Daniel realized something he hadn't before. Redemption didn't come with grand gestures or loud apologies. It came in whispers, in pancakes without bananas, in midnight dreams and old letters never sent. It came when you stayed even when it was hard. The apartment was still. The boys were still sleeping. And from the faint scent in the air, she already knew Daniel had started making pancakes. She stood by the bedroom door, watching from a distance. Daniel was in the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up, hair slightly messy, flipping a pancake with a practiced flick of the wrist. There was flour on the counter, syrup on a plate, and a growing pile of imperfect golden rounds stacked carefully like a fragile offering. He hadn't seen her yet. His movements were slow, careful, as if afraid even the spatula might betray his nerves. She watched him exhale deeply and pause. He looked around her kitchen like it was a dream he didn't believe he was allowed to be in. Then he spoke to the silence. "Don't burn this one," he whispered to himself. Sujin stepped into the room, her voice soft. "You talk to pancakes now?" Daniel turned, startled. Then a nervous laugh. "Only when they're judging me." She smiled gently and leaned against the wall. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," he said, eyes falling to the stove. "Too many thoughts. About them. About everything," he admitted. "Last night. The letter. The years. You." There was something in his voice, thicker than guilt, deeper than longing. A quiet grief that hadn't fully surfaced yet. "You don't have to say everything," she said, stepping closer. "Not all at once. But I want to," he replied, "because I never did. And because if I don't now, I'll never forgive myself." She looked at him, waiting. He set the spatula down. "I left because I believed being great meant being alone. I thought love would distract me. We were so young. And I was terrified of becoming my father." Her eyes softened. "You never told me that." "He abandoned us too," Daniel said. "Left when I was 10. My mom pretended he'd died. But he hadn't. He just disappeared. And I promised myself I would never be like him. That I would be successful enough to be untouchable. But in the end, I became the one thing I feared most." "You could have told me," she whispered. "I didn't know how," he said. "You loved so openly, so completely. I didn't know how to hold that without breaking it." Sujin stepped closer. "You didn't just break it, Daniel. You shattered it. You shattered me." "I know," he said, his voice cracking. "Every single day, I know." Silence wrapped around them like fog. Then Miho's voice floated in, muffled by a yawn. "Are the pancakes ready?" Daniel smiled through the tears that had silently built behind his eyes. "Almost, buddy." Miho appeared a second later, rubbing his eyes. Jisoo followed behind, already dressed, already watching. Daniel crouched slightly. "No bananas, I remember." Jisoo nodded, arms still folded, but the corner of his mouth tugged upward. Barely, but it was there. They sat at the table together, the four of them. For the first time, Daniel placed 2 plates in front of the boys, then took a seat beside them. He tried to act normal, but his hands trembled when he picked up the fork. He hadn't eaten breakfast with anyone in years. Not like this. Not in a kitchen filled with drawings on the fridge and the distant sound of cartoons echoing down the hallway. Miho poured syrup like it was sacred. Jisoo examined every bite like a critic. "I forgot how loud you two are," Sujin said, settling beside them. You were the one who gave them sugar, Daniel teased. Miho looked at him. Mom says pancakes are for celebration. Daniel paused. What are we celebrating? Miho shrugged. I don't know. That you're still here, I guess. Daniel's breath hitched. He looked at Sujin, who only met his gaze for a brief second. But that was all he needed. There was something unspoken in her eyes, something exhausted but still flickering with life. After breakfast, the boys drifted back to their room, arguing over a toy. Their voices faded into the background. Daniel turned to her again. Thank you for letting me do this. She looked at the dishes on the table, the sticky syrup, the crumpled napkins. I didn't let you, she said. They did. He nodded. But then her voice changed. Lower. Heavier. There's something else, she said. Something I haven't told you. He tensed, his eyes narrowing with concern. Sujin stood slowly, walking to the window. The night you left. The night I bled. I didn't lose the baby. Daniel frowned. I know. The twins. She shook her head. I was pregnant with triplets. The air drained from the room. Daniel stood slowly, his legs suddenly weak. What? One of them didn't make it, she said, not turning around. It was too early. Too much stress. Too much grief. The doctors said the remaining two were lucky to survive. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came. I named him, she whispered. Unwoo. It means graceful protector. I buried him by myself. No one came. Just me and the rain. Daniel sank back into the chair like something had been ripped out of him. I had a son, he murmured. I had a son and I never even knew his name. Sujin turned now, tears in her eyes. And I had to say goodbye without ever saying hello. Daniel put his hands to his face. The weight was unbearable. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. She walked over and sat across from him. Her hand didn't touch his, but her voice did. You didn't just miss birthdays, Daniel. You missed a funeral. He nodded, the pain too sharp for speech. And still, despite the heartbreak, the history, the ruins they stood among, something was rebuilding itself in the silence between them. Daniel sat frozen in the kitchen chair, his hands curled tightly around the edge of the table, knuckles white, chest heaving as if he had run miles just to sit still. The name, Unwoo, echoed again and again inside his mind, a name he had never heard, but now could never forget. I had a son, he whispered, more to himself than to her. A son I never held, never even knew existed. Sujin looked at him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes red and hollow from the memories she had kept buried too long. He was so small, she said. I didn't even get to see his eyes. They said it was better that way. Daniel dropped his gaze, tears clinging to his lashes. I should have been there, for all of it, even the worst of it. She didn't speak for a moment, only reached into the drawer by the sink and pulled out a small envelope. She placed it gently on the table in front of him. I kept one photo, she said. It's not much, but it's the only one. With shaking hands, Daniel opened the envelope and slid out a faded hospital photo. Tiny blanket. A name tag that read Yunwoo Park. The date beneath it was one he had no memory of. He didn't even know what he was doing that day. Some business meeting. Some flight. Something that mattered then but meant nothing now. I buried him in a quiet place, Sujin continued. A hillside cemetery outside the city. I go there every year on his birthday. Miho and Jisoo don't know. I was going to tell them eventually, when they were older. Daniel ran his thumb over the edge of the photo, careful, reverent. His voice cracked when he spoke. Can I go there? He asked. Will you take me? She hesitated, searching his face. Then she nodded. Tomorrow. The next morning was overcast. The drive to the cemetery was silent. Neither of them spoke much, the road stretching ahead like a timeline they had both ignored for too long. When they arrived, Sujin led him down a small path between rows of tiny stones, some faded, some new. The air was still, the world around them muted, as though nature itself knew to be quiet here. They stopped in front of a small granite headstone, simple but lovingly kept. Yunwoo Park, born and gone March 17th, 20, our angel, our light, our missing piece. Daniel fell to his knees, unable to stand. Soo-jin stepped back, giving him space, her hands trembling as she clasped them in front of her. He reached out and touched the cold stone. "I didn't know you," he whispered, "but I will miss you for the rest of my life." He pulled something from his coat pocket, a tiny music box he had brought from his apartment. It was old, made of wood, hand-carved, one he had bought during his time abroad and never used. He placed it gently at the foot of the grave. "I would have played this for you," he said softly. "Every night." He turned the key. A quiet melody danced through the air, soft and haunting. Not the song he wrote for Soo-jin. Something new, something unfinished. When it ended, the silence that followed felt sacred. "I don't deserve to ask for forgiveness," he said, eyes still on the stone. "But I will carry your name, Eunwoo, every day, for the rest of mine." Soo-jin walked up behind him, her voice low and trembling. "I wanted to hate you," she said, "but when I was holding him, he looked like you, and all I could think was that you should have seen him, just once." Daniel turned to look up at her. "I should have," he said, "and I will regret it forever." They stood together, the wind picking up around them, the trees gently swaying above. Then she reached into her bag and handed him a small white lily. "For him," she said. Daniel placed it beside the music box. He let his fingers linger there for a moment. Soo-jin's hands stayed firmly on the wheel. She didn't glance at him, but her silence wasn't cold. It was thoughtful, measured, like she too was learning how to breathe again. Halfway through the drive, Daniel broke the silence. "Thank you for taking me there." She didn't respond right away. Then softly, "You needed to see it. I needed you to." He nodded, watching the buildings grow taller outside the window. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I'd stayed, if I'd just listened." "You didn't," she said gently. "That's what happened." There was no malice in her voice, just truth. He turned toward her, his voice low. "I want to make new memories. With Miho, with Jisoo, and if you'll let me with you." Soo-jin's grip on the wheel tightened just slightly. "Daniel," she exhaled, her voice caught between compassion and caution. "Don't do this." "I'm not trying to rush anything," he said quickly. "I know what I broke. I look at you, and I see the life we could have had. The strength you carried. The love you gave our children. I don't know how I walked away from that. But now that I see it, I can't stop feeling it." Her eyes stayed on the road. "And what about her?" she asked quietly. Daniel blinked. "Who?" She glanced at him then, just for a second. "The woman I saw you with at that event. The one from the news articles. The one who clung to your arm like she owned you." He flinched. She's not part of my life anymore. That ended before I came back to Korea." "But she was," Soo-jin said. "When I was bleeding, when I was burying our child, when I was begging the universe for help, you were with her." Daniel's face drained of color. "It wasn't what it looked like," he said, ashamed of how cliché the words sounded even as they left his mouth. "She was safe, easy. She didn't know anything about who I used to be. She didn't expect anything real. And I did," Soo-jin whispered. He didn't deny it. She pulled the car into a quiet side street and stopped. The engine idled. Rain began to fall again, lightly tapping against the windshield. "I don't hate you," she said suddenly. "I wish I could, but I don't." Daniel turned to her fully, surprised. "I was furious. I still am sometimes. But the way the boys look at you now, it's different. They're opening up. They're healing. And part of me," her voice cracked, "part of me is healing too." Daniel reached out slowly, placing his hand over hers on the gearshift. She didn't pull away. "I will never ask you to forget," he said. "But I'll do everything I can to give you reasons to believe again. In me. In us." She looked down at their hands. Her fingers curled slightly but didn't hold his. "You haven't met Jung-woo yet," she said. The name hit him like a slap. He pulled back, his mouth tight. Are you still with him? Her answer came after a long pause. I don't know, she said honestly. He was there when no one else was. He helped raise the boys. He taught Miho how to ride a bike. Paid for Jisu's piano lessons when I couldn't. He showed up when you disappeared. Daniel looked away, ashamed. But, she continued, her voice softer now, he doesn't make my heart race the way you used to. He doesn't make it ache either. He's just safe. Daniel's eyes found hers again. And what do you want, Sujin? She was quiet. Then, I want to not be afraid of loving you again. His breath caught. Then let me show you how I've changed, he said. Not with words, with time, with choices. Every day, the car sat in silence. The rain slowed. Finally, she turned the engine off. I'm not ready, she said. But I'm not shutting the door either. He nodded. That's more than I hoped for. They stepped out into the mist, neither reaching for an umbrella. The rain kissed their skin, cold but gentle, like a baptism. As they walked side by side, the air around them felt lighter. But when they reached her apartment building, a figure was waiting by the entrance. Tall, sharp suit, perfect posture. Young-woo. He stood beneath the awning, arms crossed, watching them approach with unreadable eyes. Daniel instinctively slowed. Sujin did not. When they reached him, Jungwoo's gaze shifted to Daniel, calm but calculating. Didn't expect to see you again so soon, he said, voice like stone wrapped in silk. I didn't expect to stay this long, Daniel replied. And yet here you are, Young-woo said. Then he looked at Sujin. Can we talk? She nodded slowly, turning to Daniel. Can you wait upstairs with the boys? Daniel hesitated but agreed. Of course. As he stepped inside, he glanced back just once. Sujin and Young-woo stood facing each other in the rain. And Daniel knew. Miho and Jisu were curled up on the couch, watching an old animated movie. The light from the screen flickered gently across their faces, and for a moment, Daniel allowed himself to just watch them. He didn't interrupt. He didn't speak. He just stood there, letting their laughter be the only thing that reminded him he still had a chance. Still, his mind wouldn't stay quiet. What was Young-woo saying to her right now? Was he reminding her of all the ways he'd been there when Daniel hadn't? Was he asking her to choose? Would she? He sat down slowly, and after a few minutes, Miho looked up at him. Are you okay? The boy asked, his voice soft, uncertain. Daniel forced a smile. Just tired. Jisu's eyes narrowed slightly, then returned to the movie. But Daniel could feel his doubt. Children knew more than adults ever admitted. A distant sound broke the stillness. Keys in the door. Daniel stood quickly, heart pounding in his chest. The door opened. Sujin stepped inside first, her expression unreadable, her hair slightly damp from the rain. She looked at the boys and smiled faintly. Hey, she said softly. You too good. Miho nodded and turned back to the screen. Jisu, however, looked past her, to the man behind her. Young-woo entered next. He didn't speak. His eyes found Daniel's, and for a long moment, they just looked at each other. Two men, both tethered to the same woman, both knowing only one would stay. Daniel cleared his throat. Do you want me to step out? Sujin looked between the two of them, then shook her head. No, she said. This conversation isn't about hiding anything anymore. Young-woo stepped forward, composed. We should talk. The three of us. Daniel nodded slowly. Sujin turned to the boys. Can you two give us a few minutes? Miho was already sliding off the couch. Jisu, reluctant, followed. As they passed Daniel, Jisu glanced up at him. Something cautious in his expression. Something protective. Daniel watched them disappear down the hall. The silence that followed was dense. Young-woo spoke first. I want to be clear. I'm not here to argue. Daniel nodded. Neither am I. He looked at Sujin. But I do need to understand what you want. Her eyes flickered with emotion, but her voice was calm. I don't know, she said. I thought I did. I thought stability, safety. Someone who never left. That was the answer. And it was, Young-woo said. For a long time, Daniel said nothing, letting her speak. Sujin crossed her arms, not out of anger, but to hold herself steady. You showed up when no one else did, she told Jungwoo. You helped raise them. You gave them love, attention, and protection when I had nothing. I will never forget that. Jungwoo's jaw tightened. But, her voice cracked. But I never stopped missing him. Daniel's breath hitched. And that's not fair, she continued. To you or to them or to me. I tried so hard to bury it, to pretend it didn't matter. But the truth is, it always did. It always will. Jungwoo looked at her, eyes glistening, but he nodded. I always knew, he said quietly. Even when you smiled at me, there was a part of you still somewhere else. I wanted to love you the same, she said. But I didn't. I couldn't. She turned to Daniel now, her voice trembling. And you left me bleeding in a hallway. You left without looking back. I want to hate you, and some days I still do. But you came back. And you didn't run this time. Daniel's voice barely rose above a whisper. I'm not running anymore. Jungwoo stepped forward, pain written across his face, but no bitterness. I love those boys like they're my own. I always will. But I won't stay where I'm second choice. A tear slid down Sujin's cheek. I never wanted to hurt you. I know, Jungwoo said. But love isn't about intentions. It's about truth. He looked at Daniel one last time. I don't forgive you, he said. But I hope one day those boys will. Daniel nodded solemnly. I'll spend every day trying to earn it. With that, Jungwoo turned, walked to the door, and left. The click of it closing was final. Sujin sat down on the couch, her body trembling slightly. Daniel didn't speak.